Hi, folks. Good evening, and welcome to another Whyz HR. Everything you want to know about human resources. Let me ask you, have you ever had a situation where you had to deal with let's call it a troublesome boss? That's what we want to talk about tonight. Stay with us. I think you're going to enjoy it. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Dr. Jack Mitchell, and welcome to our show today. We're really happy about being able to present to you issues on human resources, various aspects of human resources, led by pretty senior HR professionals, so that you really get an insight as to how the HR professional thinks through these various issues. Normally, I have my co-host, my celebrity co-host, and this month it's Colette Gotti, who is the Director of Human Resources for Solid Waste Authority of the Palm Beaches. Colette had a family emergency, and so she's not able to be with us tonight, but we have a wonderful guest, and you've seen him before on the show. His name is David Wood, and I want to just have David come and join us right now on camera. David, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening. Thanks for asking
Good evening. Thank you for filling in and sitting in the important the second chair, if you would. But tonight, with all your experience, I'm going to try to have you in the first chair, if you would. So, or maybe we'll have mutual chairs. David just brings to the HR world a terrific amount of experience. David, just give the folks just a little of your background, just so they really appreciate, the expertise you do have in human resources.
As far as in HR, I've been in HR probably about 10, 12 years, something like that. I have 16 years of government and 14 years of private sector, plus a few more years on that. I'm certified by the PHR, SPHR, and an MCP from Microsoft as well.
Wow. Okay. And was there any forte that are you an HR generalist or are you an HR specialist? How would you consider yourself?
Currently, I am a senior HR generalist, yes.
Generalist. And for the audience, what does that mean as a specialist versus a generalist? What does that mean, David?
Usually, a specialist has a special type of program they run, like benefits or something like that, where a generalist pretty much has to know all the aspects of HR, anything from, benefits, new hires, all the way to retirement and disciplinary actions and risk management as well. So a little bit of everything pretty much for generalists.
Yeah, just the way I break it up in my head, the way I've worked it in my career, we have what's called personnel administration, and that's a person that will handle the policies and procedures and all the paperwork, make sure that the files are correct and all the HIRS, all of those kind of issues are taken care of. Then you have the function of staffing, and in staffing you're going to have job descriptions, you're going to have the actual staffing and recruiting of personnel, whether you work with recruiters, you do it yourself, or whatever the case is. And we spent quite a bit of time with that in the past months on that whole staffing issue because it's so very important. Then also, there's a whole concept of benefits. What kind of benefits does a company provide, and how do they make that judgment? One of the things I want to maybe next week is have Colette, who has an amazing background in benefits. I mean, she really is an expert and certified as an expert in benefits. So I'm going to ask her to speak to us a little bit about benefits, but that's one of the other functions. So people can just specialize in benefits and they'd be called a specialist. Then you have compensation. Again, Colette is an expert and also certified as a compensation expert. Colette has a lot of very highly sophisticated certifications within the HR field, benefits and compensation being one of them. Then there's another whole area called training and development. There's an area called employee relations, which is a huge area of responsibility. And then there's labor relations. So there's 7 different major functions as I was going through my HR career that would be part of a large HR program. And so a generalist is someone that, like yourself and myself, have had experience in many of those different functions, and we're expert in all of those functions, as opposed to someone who is just an expert on staffing or just an expert on benefits or compensation or whatever. So you have that difference in HR, okay? Before we get into the subject today, because I introduced it as having kind of a troublesome boss, and I'll get into that in just a minute, but I did want to tell the folks that we welcome you tonight to our program. I say tonight because we're filming live here at our studios in the lovely Port St. Lucie at TCoast Studios. And we thank the folks at TCoast Studios for providing us really a first-class operation. And we have our own producer here who takes care of us and makes sure all the lighting and the sound and everything is perfect. Her name's Indira, and she's on the other side of the camera, making sure everything is going smoothly. So we want to thank them. But I wanted to just let people know that if you have a question, feel free to just put it on a chat and we'll answer it. This is a live stream and we can do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that because your name will show on that, then just email me. And matter of fact, the reason for the show tonight is someone did email me a question about having a troublesome boss. So that kind of gave me the idea, well, let's have a show about that. So feel free to do that. I have 3 goals in all my shows. First of all, I want them to be fun. This is David and I, this is our free time. We've done our work for the day, and this is time that we just want to kind of enjoy and share something that we love and we're passionate about, namely the HR function. So I want it to be fun, but I also want it to be engaging. I don't want us to lecture and just, pontificate about human resources. I want it to be engaging so that it's kind of a discussion that David and I will have and other professionals as we bring them on. And then the third, I really do want it to be informative. I want everyone to go away with some understanding as to some aspect of human resources and human resources management, especially as seen through the eyes of senior people like David and like myself. So that's really my goal. Those three qualities. I want it to be engaging. I want it to be informative, and I want it to be fun. Okay, so that's it. And I have a bell here. So if David or if I say something that I think is brilliant, then we'll hear a bell. If you don't hear the bell, well, that's a wait for us for next week, and we'll say something brilliant next week. So it'll be a reason for you to tune in again next week for our show. David, let's talk a little bit about that whole thing of, I got an email, not an email, yeah, it was an email. I got an email this past week from a viewer, and she was asking about limits, or she used the word boundaries. I have my notes here. She used the word boundaries. Are there boundaries that a boss should have with regard to asking things of the employee? The thing was, how much do I have to do? I want to be a good employee. I want to demonstrate to the company that I am serious about my employment here. I want to show that I am someone that is trustworthy and competent. But sometimes she feels that her boss is asking her to do more things than would be expected in a normal job. So we're calling that kind of the troublesome boss. And in this instance, how would you coach that person, or what would you counsel that person with regard to a boss who, and how would you handle that? A boss who is asking this individual, let's call her Zelda. I like Zelda as Z just to keep protect everyone's right to privacy. Let's call her Zelda. What would you say to Zelda in terms of how do you handle a boss like that?
I think a lot of it is staying calm. I think it's staying calm and keeping the communication open. you can't always go to battle with somebody, so you have to be a little bit more creative on your side on how to handle that, find a better way to communicate them, wait until your anger is gone if you're upset about a situation, and try to approach them maybe from a different angle or situation by providing other types of ways to get the same thing done.
Boy, I think that deserves maybe 2 bells. That was excellent. Yeah, one of the things, I'm a psychologist, as many of you know, as well as a lawyer, but from a psychological point of view, to speak when you're angry can really be fatal in terms of a relationship. So your point, David, is psychologically very, very sound and wise advice. Don't go to your boss when you're angry and upset. That's not gonna win the battle for you. And make sure that you're doing something that's serious. So when you're going to speak to the boss, you want to make sure that it is something that's worth speaking about or fighting for. And so you don't want to just complain on every little thing. You want to make sure that what you're talking about has some seriousness to it. And one of the things, though, what I like is the idea of finding the right time to talk to the boss. Make sure that he or she is in a positive mood. Make sure that it's a time when you can speak privately, not in public, and go to the boss and say, and I love that expression, help me understand. And I think that's an expression that we need to use more and more frequently. Help me understand, my plate is full and I can only do so much, and help me prioritize because you've asked me to go and do this project and do that project, and that's fine. I'm happy to do that, but I also have the Mitchell project and I have the wood project and so forth. How would you like me to do that? And so get from that person the advice as to how to prioritize, so that the boundaries, so that he or she all of a sudden starts realizing you can't do everything. There's only 8 hours of a day, or maybe 10 hours. But beyond that, there is a work balance or a life balance that you want to maintain. So I think that whole thing of being tactful, as you're suggesting, David, and also doing it at the right time, in the right place, with the right attitude, and asking, help me understand, how would you like me to prioritize all the things? And then just list. And so go in there prepared with, the various tasks that you have on your plate, and just say, help me, how would you like me to prioritize this? Because on this one here, I feel it's going to take this amount of time. So I think that, remaining calm, as you said, David, and also speaking calmly and not out of a sense of anger and so forth, and to treat it as a professional, I have a question, as opposed to, hey, you jerk, what the heck are you doing? You're such a pain in the neck. You're always asking me to do things. That's going to get you nowhere. So to do it as a professional. Do you have any other comments about that, David?
I think it's important. I think an employee can also seek out assistance through their peers or human resources as well. I've had a lot of employees that have come to talk to me and maybe kind of want to do a role play situation, so they can kind of get a little practice on how they can then approach that subject with their boss.
Boy, you're hot tonight. That's another one. Yeah, you can go to the HR person or a friend. I kind of stay away from friends, because then there's a possibility of starting, talking about the boss and the negativity and gossip and all that kind of thing. So you can, if you really have a good relationship and that person is very mature, but I would hesitate to do that. But I think the idea of going to the HR professional, because that's a professional person that knows when to be quiet and when not to be quiet, and when to keep a confidence and when not to keep a confidence. And if you go to that HR professional and say, listen, David, I got a situation with Zeke, and he keeps on asking me to do, can I role play how I should talk with him? I think that's a great idea. So wonderful. Okay. What are some of the other issues that could bother an employee? You mentioned, as you and I were talking, preparing for the show, you mentioned a number a number of different situations that could cause some issue. Just give me another example that you've dealt with.
One of them could be asking the employee to do something outside of the business hours. So that's another whole nother issue from a wage and hour perspective, depending on if the employee is an hourly employee, and also part of their work-life balance as well.
Okay, excellent. Can you give me an example? Can you think of a situation when that kind of took place?
Well, a situation could be like if if an employee is overwhelmed, they might think, oh, I'm going to clock out for the day and I'm just going to stay a little bit over and finish this. And what they don't realize is they don't want to look bad, but it actually is not a very good situation for them or the employer from a compensation standpoint. So you can get in trouble with the overtime situation or things like that if they're not allowed to work overtime, or doing simple things at home. Oh, I'll just make this call for my boss or something like that without realizing actually technically they're on the clock.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that because that's a wonderful issue. Let's take a brief commercial break and we'll be back right after the break. Thanks.
The Greek philosopher Socrates said, "The first step to wisdom is to know thyself." Complete a Whyz Hr personality profile to really know yourself. Get a 93 to 97% accurate 40-page comprehensive report of your personality styles. You'll also have the opportunity to have a phone consultation with an expert in understanding the report.
Okay. David, let's talk a little bit more about this unemployment compensation overtime. There are laws that govern the whole process. So you've heard of some people are exempt and some people are non-exempt. Some people are hourly and some people are salary. Well, when you're exempt means you're free from a particular law, the Fair Labor Standards Act. And in that particular law, actually it was developed in 1939, it's that old, but it says that certain people that are exempt from that law, they're salaried. But there's only 5 different classifications of those people that have a particular job that would qualify them to be exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act, exempt from overtime. Now, I remember years ago when I was active and had my more legal hat on, I had a number of clients and they were getting in trouble because they were saying to their secretary, because you're working hard and you're my executive secretary and I'm the CEO, therefore I'm going to make you a salary person, or I'm going to make you a vice president, and therefore I'm going to pay you a salary so I don't have to pay you overtime. Well, the fact of the matter is, more than likely that's illegal because it's not the title, it's the essential elements of the job is how you define who is exempt and who is not exempt. And so an employer cannot just arbitrarily say this position is exempt. It has to really be studied by an HR professional who knows what the laws are and knows what the qualifications are to identify, is this particular position exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act? So that's number one. So when you hear someone is exempt or salaried, that means that their job technically is such, it's one of the 5 jobs that are identified as being exempt from that particular law. And that if anyone is ever, if someone comes in to do an audit, and they'll come in and do audits every once in a while, they will look at the different positions, but they'll also look at the job descriptions and so forth. So there's various criteria that have to be met to be exempt. but they're also called salaried. So that's one group of people. Then the other group, David, as you know, is called the hourly or the non-exempt. They're not exempt. They are held to that. And what that law says is that if you work 40 hours, over 40 hours in a work week, then you are eligible for, and you must receive time and a half for any hours over 40 hours. So David, explain how that works for that issue that you just raised.
A lot of times it's an issue. It could affect your budget. If an employee isn't compensated, or you think, well, just make them salary, but you do have to pay them. So if they work even 15 minutes over the 40 hours, you have to give them the time and a half rate for that particular even 15 minutes. So I think a lot of times people don't realize that having somebody stay maybe a half an hour over to finish something, they don't realize that they really should be clocked in so that they're compensated for that based upon the law.
And one of the things too is that sometimes people will stay over and they will get, the boss will think, well, I never approved that. And it's in the handbook that says, you need approval. Well, the fact of the matter is, in my experience legally, that the courts are going to support the employee and judge on their behalf that they get the time and a half, because even though it's in the employee handbook that you have to have that time authorized by your supervisor, the responsibility for that is up to the supervisor to make sure that the employee is being responsible for that. But if the individual, if Zeke or Zelda works that 15 minutes or the 30 minutes or whatever, then the company has to pay them, even though they may say, well, I never approved it. Well, the fact of the matter is, it's in the policy, and so the employee should have known better. Now, you can discipline the person if they abuse that particular policy, but the fact of the matter is, if they work those hours, you've got to pay them the time and a half, whether it's for 15 minutes or it's for 15 hours, you've got to pay them. What about someone that is going on a business trip, that an employee, you're the boss, and you have a conference or convention in Las Vegas, and it's going to be on Saturday, and you say, well, this is wonderful. Zelda would love to go. She loves to gamble, and she loves to have a good time, so she can go. We're going to pay her flight. We're going to pay the hotel. We'll pay her food. That's a great deal for her. So let's have Zelda go, and she can assist us on the booth. What's the situation with that, David? I should ask you, because I know the answer.
You have to worry about how many hours they're going to work. I mean, did they work a 40-hour week and then they're working on Saturday? Technically, those are hours.
Yeah, but I've paid them. They're going to have a good time. I've paid them the airplane. I've paid them the hotel. They're going to stay at a lovely hotel. They can, have wonderful meals all on us. So it's like a vacation for. All she has to do is just spend a couple hours, working a booth.
If they're actually performing a work function, they would have to be compensated. So as far as
you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely. What happens if Zelda needs a little bit of help on QuickBooks, and there's a course that's going to be given on QuickBooks at 7:00 on Thursday nights at the local college? Do you have to pay to do that?
If they consider it to be work related, they would need to pay that for the employee, unless the employee is doing something for their own personal development that's not being required by the employer. You would need to compensate them.
The man knows his employment law. Yeah, it's very, very good. Good for you, David. Yeah, if the company says we need you to go and to attend, they have to pay, even though, but if you decide for your own personal growth and betterment to go, then the company doesn't have to pay. So you're absolutely right. So there's all types of those type, and then, when someone flies to a place, you have to pay and so forth. So there's all types of nuances and questions when it comes to this overtime in the Fair Labor Standards Act. So it's one of those things that I know as a lawyer, I love that, because it's all those kind of what if type of questions and so forth, and what's the correct answer. And sometimes there's really the correct answer is what the judge says, because he or she is going to weigh if there's a disagreement as to what the law says and how it's going to be interpreted in a particular situation. Let's take one more quick commercial, and then we'll come back. Thanks, David.
Some of the benefits that we've received from the Leadership Institute is, one, getting to know what your work style is, and just finding like better ways or the best way to communicate with not only your team, but with people in general. And I found this leadership training to be something I did not imagine. It's been very enjoyable. It's very interactive. And I'm learning things about myself that I didn't know before. It really makes you think and look at things in a different perspective.
David, I also received, this Zelda who emailed me was also asking about, under the concept of boundaries. Apparently her boss used to like to email her to do some various work during the evening and so forth. Something that needed to be done, and he forgot to ask her during the day to do it and so forth. What's the story on that? Well, there's two things. One is it goes back to if that bothers, if it's an emergency, then you're a good employee, you're going to do it. But you're still, again, from a compensation point of view, she would be eligible for compensation for that. So you have to but you have to let them know and document that type of thing. One of the things I ran into a situation where this owner of a company had a woman who was really a good employee, and she had a new baby, and so she went home and took care of the baby. Then she wanted to work from home, and she worked doing whatever was necessary to help her boss and so forth. And everything was fine until there was a disagreement between the boss and Zelda. And she went to the unemployment and complained, saying that he owed her was literally a couple of $1,000s in terms of overtime pay. And he contested that and said that, I never approved that. And so he said, I didn't know that she was working all those hours. I would never approve, especially the number of hours. What do you think the court said on that case? Because it did go to court. What do you think the court said on that? Did he have to pay her? Because she had no documentation. She had no documentation. He had no documentation. It was his word against her word. How do you think the courts responded to that?
I'd say the courts were probably very favorable to the employee, especially if the employee tracked the number of hours.
And the employee didn't track the hours, but she said that this is what it was. And so because he failed to set up a system to track her hours and so forth, the courts, and he said, well, she never worked all those hours. And the court says, well, you can't prove that she didn't. And so he had to pay a fine plus pay her. He was not a happy camper, I'll tell you. His name was Phil, and I know Phil, and Phil was not a happy camper at the end of that situation. So it's really important to know what the laws are in terms of, especially when it comes to compensation, because That's so very important to an employee. And also, in terms of a relationship, it's really good to clarify those things with your boss to make sure that upfront, so you don't get into that negative relationship. To say upfront, if you're the employee, you should be mature enough to be able to say in a nice way to the boss, I want to make sure that you know that if I do that, then I'm to understand there's overtime pay involved. And then give the boss the opportunity to say, oh, well, that's fine, I understand. But at least I suggest act as an adult, do it nicely. Always, you don't want to be confrontational. That's not what it is. Because this is your boss, and you want to have a good relationship with that person, or you want to build a good relationship with that person. So you don't want to be confrontational in that person's face. Well, you're going to owe me. Talk like a normal human being, talk in a friendly way, and say, listen, I just want to make sure that that we're both on the same wavelength, because from the best of my knowledge, I would be eligible for overtime for that. And then let the boss say yes or no, and then at least you'll have some clarity that up front. Don't wait till afterwards, because then the horse is out of the barn, and it could be really, really difficult. David, it's amazing. Time is over. I can't believe that we have spent this time. And again, you are doing such a great job for us that we're going to have you come back next week, if that's okay. Really enjoy your company. We wish Colette the best. We're sorry that she's not with us tonight, but she will be with us next week. And she just adds to, but again, I want to get some of her background, and we'll give her a lot of time to give us some ideas as to compensation and benefits for folks. And so we can ask her questions about that, because she's really the brainiac. She has better background and skills than I have, and I think better background and skills in those particular areas than both of us perhaps put together. So let's pick her brain on behalf of our audience. Audience, I want to thank you tonight for allowing David and me to spend this time with you. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope you found it engaging. I hope you found it informative, and it was overall a positive experience for you. I wanted to take your cell phones, and again, if you would, go to your calendar in here and put in Whyz Hr next Tuesday at 7:30, same time, same place, and we would love to see you then, and have a wonderful week. All the best, and thank you.